Stand clear of the closing doors, please.
And what is up, you guys? Welcome to the stream. A very busy 24 hours here for the New York Mets. As late last night, I was already nice and comfy, cozy in my bed, ready to retire for the evening and just put all the day's worries aside. Who knows, maybe the Mets are still in on Cody Bellinger. Who knows what's going to happen next in this wild ride that has been the 2026 offseason so far. And then all of a sudden, the news starts pouring in. Still, while I'm fast asleep, the Mets trading for Luis Robert Jr. I've been corrected on that many times. It is not Luis Robert Jr., but apparently Robert. In any case, however you do pronounce his name, the Mets add the talented center fielder, though he is, of course, coming off of two really difficult seasons out with the Chicago White Sox. Hard to blame him on that. We're going to get into him and what the Mets send back. Of course, Luis Angel Acuna, and then one of their lesser-known prospects, a right-handed pitcher going back to Chicago in that deal. And of course, the Mets introducing Bichette today at Citi Field as he puts on a Mets jersey for the first time. He'll be wearing number 19 for this team. And all of a sudden, this Mets roster, this Mets offseason is rounding into form. It is starting to look like the team that we'll likely be seeing on an everyday basis here in 2026. But there is still the potential for them to continue to add, and specifically in their starting rotation, as we did hear from David Stearns and his press conference, or at least in some of the offshoots of Bichette's press conference here this afternoon. So we're going to break it down. We're going to get into it. We're going to talk about what's next, just as the thumbnail title says, just as the title of this live stream says. What do the Mets do next? Because the one thing that they really have not addressed at all this offseason is what was probably their biggest detriment and the reason for their collapse at the end of 2025, and that is their starting rotation. So we're going to look at some of those names, see which of them seems most realistic and plausible for the Mets to put a cherry on top of this 2026 offseason. Guys, what is up? I'm Tony Metro. You know the drill. Daily Mets content here on my YouTube channel. Maybe catching this on Twitter as well. You can follow me on either of the platforms, but for YouTube purposes, really appreciate everybody hitting that subscribe button. Lately, we're growing exponentially here, and that's a huge thanks to you guys. But if you're not already subscribed, go ahead, hit that button right now for that daily Mets content and all coverage regarding this team in Major League Baseball. You can also leave this video a like. Go ahead and do that right now as well. Really goes a long way toward helping us out here at the channel, trying to get to that goal of 6K subscribers by opening day. 65 days left to do that. Let's go to the chat right away. Ronald Walters, but is he a great fielder? You're talking about Luis Robert Jr. Yes, he has really good numbers, definitely as a center fielder. Obviously, the bat has been a big struggle for him for the most part. He has had these few little 2-3 week stretches throughout the last two seasons with Chicago, where he started to look a lot more like the MVP candidate, Luis Robert Jr. from 2023 when he hit 38 home runs. But putting it all together on a consistent basis at the plate has definitely been an issue for Robert, but definitely not in the field. With the glove, you're hard-pressed to find many other outfielders and specifically center fielders as good as Luis Robert Jr. So that is very exciting. Now the Mets have to hope that among a more talented lineup, where he probably won't be getting pitched around like the way he was out in Chicago with a team full of quadruple A and triple A minor leaguers, that he can actually live up to the hype of being one of the game's top prospects just a few short years ago. Let's see. Oddville and Mets are a Freddie Peralta away from an A- offseason. I would sign off on that grade. I'm with you there, Oddvillain. It's hard to give them anything better because they lose Edwin Diaz. I still feel that way, more so in a sentimentality kind of way toward losing Pete Alonso. But the way it went with Edwin Diaz, the fact that he went to the Dodgers, your biggest threat in the National League, and for just a measly couple extra $1 million, it's almost impossible to give the Mets anything better than an A- grade. But if they do find a way to land Freddie Peralta, which we got a little bit of information on a potential trade between them and the Brewers this afternoon, that would definitely push it closer 2-A for me as well. No doubt about it. Ron says, I hope so. Yeah, no, he really is a very talented outfielder. No doubt about it. Again, now it's just about, hey, is he going to finally put it all together at the plate again? Was he just suffering from Chicago White Sox fatigue over the last couple years where they're perennially losing 100 games year in and year out? And is he now going to be able to get back to form from 2023 when he had a monster season at the plate? That is the hope. That is the risk that the Mets are putting here on Luis Robert Jr. Timothy Frith, will the Mets sign Valdez after missing out on Ranger Suarez? Well, we know Ranger Suarez just introduced today to Boston, signing with the Red Sox. Look, guys, I've said it before. I still think it's unlikely the Mets are going to get Framber Valdez for a couple of reasons. Number one, he stated he wanted a very long-term deal. We've heard the Mets do not want to go past 3 years on Valdez, let alone really any other free agents this offseason. And number two, he has the qualifying offer attached to him. And the Mets signing Bo Bichette, making that official here today, would have to pay the significant fee or penalties for their draft in this upcoming season. They will lose their top 4 draft picks as well as the $1 million of international pool money they've already lost for signing Bo Bichette. So to be honest, I really still think Framber Valdez is unlikely for the Mets, but reports have had them connected to him still, even in the wake of signing Bo Bichette, which was actually very pleasantly surprising. I feel if you've already given out one guy or one contract to a guy with a qualifying offer, you might as well jump into the deep end head first, take a cannonball, and just go after it. The question is Framber Valdez at 32 years old, potentially on a 4-year contract, worth that kind of risk? That's a question that I still have about him. Henry Campos, now we trade for Peralta as long as we can sign him to a long-term deal. You guys may have seen the video I put out earlier this afternoon on the different platforms. There was a trade proposal from the Brewers, which we're going to get into here in just a moment. And it was basically Brandon Sproat and Jet Williams for Freddie Peralta. I don't love the idea of that trade necessarily. I'd like to minimize or take back a little bit on the Jet Williams side of that. I'm okay with moving Brandon Sproat. They need a guy to insert into their rotation in Milwaukee if they're dealing Peralta. This is the team that had the best record in the National League last year. They're not simply selling for the sake of selling. So they get Sproat. I think you appease them in that regard. As far as the other prospect going, if I could change it out from Jet Williams to someone a little bit lower on the Mets' top prospect ranks, I'd feel a lot more comfortable about that. But if you are telling me it's going to be Williams, as long as the Mets have plans to sign Peralta to an extension, I think he is ripe for the picking to sign an extension. Entering his age 30 season, he's going to have to test free agency next year as a 31-year-old when the team, or rather the entire league, may be heading for a lockout, and the future of spending in Major League Baseball is very uncertain with the idea of there being a potential salary cap, among other changes to how players get paid. I think it would be a really good idea for Freddie Peralta to sign an extension. And I'm not saying take him for or he should sign for pennies on the dollar. I'm just saying it is a very big changing landscape all across Major League Baseball, given his age, given the amount of years that he has pitched before. I wouldn't be surprised if the Mets had plans of trying to get that done if they do, in fact, send a prospect haul for Freddie Peralta. Javi Beers, Luis Garcia, good pickup. Yeah, so the Mets also make an addition to their bullpen today. They signed longtime veteran Luis Garcia. I saw a really crazy stat or thing on Twitter today. Luis Garcia's first major league contract was signed when Jonah Tong was 7 months old. So think about that. Obviously, Jonah Tong's only 22, but that's how long Luis Garcia goes back. Now, obviously, he didn't just immediately step into the big leagues and on a big league mound, but his first professional strikeout was of former national great Ryan Zimmerman. So Luis Garcia, coming off a decent year, had like a 3.52 earned run average with 2 different teams in 2025. Not bad for a depth signing. Not someone that I think is going to come out and be dominant for this team, but I think he's more like kind of a placeholder until the Mets decide that maybe some of their young arms from the system are ready to take his spot, or whomever's spot in the Mets bullpen that doesn't pan out. Let's see who else we got here. Richard Zucker. Only issue I have with the trade is that they got rid of Acuna. They really didn't give him enough of a chance to prove himself. Look, I think Luis Angel Acuna is probably what he's proven to be at this point. A guy that is really great with the glove all over the infield. He even had a little bit of a cameo in center field. Speedster, great base runner, your late inning defensive replacement and pinch runner. I saw enough out of Luis Angel Acuna's at-bats and read enough about what he did in the minor leagues. He has always had discipline issues. He's always had struggles finding, getting walks, drawing base on balls, and he strikes out a lot. Look, is it possible that Luis Angel Acuna does pan out and turns into a very serviceable bat along with those other attributes that he brings? Yes, but he's definitely not the guy that was going to hold me up from filling a big position of need, and that was in center field. While it's nice to have Tyrone Taylor's glove out there, we know what he is, a fourth outfielder that is not going to hit very much. You're hoping that Luis Robert Jr. is going to bounce back and revert to his 2023 self. I am not all that confident in that. I will fully and be the first to admit that. But this is a money move by the Mets in terms of Steve Cohen is taking a $22 million gamble that he will revert back to that. And at the very worst, I think most people are in agreement. You really didn't have to give up that much. Would have been nice to see Acuna turn into his brother. I don't think that was ever actually on the table, but you look back to the trade where the Mets actually acquired him, which was for Max Scherzer, where they paid the majority of that contract down to send him to Texas back in 2023. And now it's turned into Luis Robert Jr., albeit at a bit of a steep price tag for that $20 million plus $2 million buyout for next year, but does also have a club option again for $20 million in 2027 if he does turn things around for this team. So we shall see. In a vacuum, I think it's a good trade, but definitely need to see Luis Robert look closer to what he was doing a couple years ago than what we have seen from him over the past 2 seasons out in Chicago. Let's see who else we got here. Javi Beers, if they make a trade, they need to go after Skubal. I still think the Skubal idea is just a bit of a pipe dream. I think it's going to be way too expensive. I don't think it's worth it, to be honest with you. I'd have to see the actual names on paper, but to be completely honest, I think you're better off just waiting on Skubal till he's a free agent next year. Just hope that the Dodgers don't pull something crazy off and trade for him here during the rest of this offseason or at the deadline this upcoming season. But me personally, I think it's going to cost the farm for whoever does eventually trade for him. And I would much rather just wait until he's simply a free agent next year, where you know he's going to command a record-breaking contract coming off back-to-back Cy Youngs these past 2 years. Francisco Campos says, I believe Stearns is cooking something up with Skubal. I don't know, man. I don't know. I feel like Peralta's more realistic. It's not going to be as expensive. Obviously, he's not as good as Skubal is, but I just don't think that they're going to empty the farm, which they have propped up so much over this last year, to try and get it for Skubal when the guy is going to be a free agent next year. Look, would I love it? Of course I would. Again, I would want to know who's going back in a potential trade, and maybe I wouldn't love it as much, but it just doesn't fit in with anything that David Stearns has told us this offseason. Then again, he wanted to preach defensive, versatility and, run prevention all offseason, and we have 2 guys playing positions that they have never played before, and Bichette at third and Jorge Polanco at first. So I'm not totally sure I am believing everything that David Stearns and this front office has been telling us since the winter began. Let's see who else we got here. Quinn Ayers, he was never going to hit enough at the MLB level as far as Acuna. I totally agree with you. Nimbasuk 2K7, is there a Skubal sighting in our future for before pitchers and catchers report? Again, I don't think it's going to happen. I could be wrong, but I don't know. I feel like it's kind of unlikely at this point. I don't think that anything is going to really change that. The only possible way that the Mets might be able to get Skubal on a bit of a discount is how this arbitration hearing goes between the Tigers and between Skubal. I said this a couple of weeks ago when we found out they were separated by $13 million in their filings, that being the Tigers and Skubal's camp. And that was almost a record within the last couple of years. And so maybe the Tigers do just say, look, we don't want to pay him $30 million for this year. We know we're not going to retain him next year. Let's just wipe our hands clean of this, get the best prospect return that we possibly can, plus throw in a major league ready pitcher or 2. And maybe that's the way they do end up doing this. So I think that's the only way that Skubal is going to get dealt, if the Tigers just finally get fed up with the whole situation. Who else do we got in here? Ralph Cintrone, bring back Marte for the outfield depth to keep Soto happy, and let's work on starting pitching. I've said this before, guys. It kind of irks me that we have to do that to appease Juan Soto. But look, if Soto is saying that Marte is a leader in that clubhouse, then yeah, okay, you could do a lot worse than him. But it's not exactly the sexiest move for to waste a roster spot on him. Or waste isn't maybe the right word, but really, Starling Marte. I mean, again, if it's going to keep Juan Soto happy, all right. And if he is in fact as good of a clubhouse leader as Soto says, then okay. But wouldn't be my first choice personally for the 36, 37-year-old Starling Marte. Let's see, who else do we got here? I can't say that name. Robert, please. Yes, exactly. Sorry. Dave M, what's good, Tony? What do you think the next moves are? I'm thinking it's going to be a trade or a signing of a starting pitcher. Freddie Peralta, I think very, very less likely. Tariq Skubal. And then there's the possibility of going out and just simply signing one of these free agents. Unfortunately, the biggest and best one of them all, Framber Valdez, does have that qualifying offer attached to him, but that might just be the simplest way to go about this. Bite the bullet, give up those draft picks. You already gave up one of them for Bichette, and just try to roll with that. And then you probably have a better idea of what these youngsters look like midway through the year. And you can assess whether you do need to add another starting pitcher, a legitimate veteran frontline starting pitcher that may become available closer to June and July, based on what you've seen out of the guys like McLean and Tong and Sproat and any of the other names in the Mets farm system. So that might be the smartest, most economical way of going about things. Maybe not in terms of what the actual money is going to cost to sign Framber Valdez and what you'll lose in terms of this upcoming year's draft because of his qualifying offer, but that might be the smartest way to simply go about it. Let's see, Dave. Oh, I already got you. Sorry. Joaquin Rodriguez, you think the Mets have enough to trade for Yandy Diaz for first base? They definitely have enough, but I think the Mets are done position player wise. I said in the video yesterday, or this morning rather, after waking up to the Luis Robert news, I was hoping that they would still be in on Cody Bellinger. I was very disappointed that it basically spelled the end of their pursuit for Belly, but very shortly after that, Bellinger re-signed with the Yankees, and that was the fate I did believe was eventually going to happen anyway. It seemed like a perfect match for those two sides, and it was only a matter of time before it happened. But it does sound like the Mets are very comfortable with their position player front. A lot of that is seconded by Will Salmon, who, of course, we know, great job covering the Mets for The Athletic and a friend of the show here. We're going to read his article here in just a few moments, but I think that Yandy Diaz would be nice, but he's not going to probably be on the Mets' radar at this point, especially not for first base, where they do expect Polanco to be the first baseman the majority of this year. And with Yandy having his own struggles there at first base defensively, unfortunately, I don't think that's something that works for the Mets. Maybe a midseason pickup, depending on what's going on with Tampa Bay and where they are in the race by that time. And if the Mets are in need of a bat, maybe, yeah, and he can be more of a DH guy for the Mets toward the second half of the season. But right now, I don't think that's the case with Diaz. Let's see who else. Henry Campos. Robert Jr. will have a bounce back year. Spent the last 2 years on the worst team in baseball. Healthy, he'll hit 30 homers and play solid center field. Hey, man, your lips to God's ears. If Luis Robert hits 30 home runs next year, that is bonkers. This is going to be a really good Mets lineup if that's the case. I'm not ready to say that, but if he does actually do that, what you just predicted, the Mets will be in a very good spot this year. Let's see, Francisco Campos. We got a lot of Camposes in here. The thing is that no player on the Mets has been linked to this offseason become a Met. All players have been kept in the dark. That's the only reason I believe Skubal might be as possible. Okay, and that's a fair point. A lot of people have noted that and said that before, pointed it out here in the chats. Anytime the Mets have been linked to somebody, they do not end up getting him. He goes somewhere else. So that is a fair way to look at it. We have not heard a peep about the Mets and Skubal. We haven't really heard Skubal being involved in any trade rumors with teams. So very fair and very possible still. Again, I think that arbitration hearing with the Tigers is going to be a big thing. Harrison Bader reunion? No, I don't think that's happening now. I think Luis Robert Jr. trade completely puts that out of the question now. I said it just last night in the stream prior to them getting Luis Robert Jr. that I would have been open to a Harrison Bader reunion. I'd rather them go that avenue than signing a guy like Austin Hayes. Again, this is all prior to them signing Robert or trading for Luis Robert. Now I think the Mets are pretty set. Now they have a three-man outfield of Luis Robert Jr., Tyrone Taylor, Juan Soto, and I think Carson Bench is probably going to make the opening day roster. Whether he's your starting everyday left fielder or not, I'm not sure. I think that's probably the best way to bring a kid up. Let him go birth by fire, baptism by fire. That's the expression. And see if he can swing it. And I think that might be the case here with Carson Bench. So I don't think Harrison Bader or another outfielder makes a ton of sense. Maybe a guy like Austin Hayes, and he kind of slots in there if the Mets don't want to put any pressure on Bench to necessarily be an impact player opening day and be ready to take the reins immediately. Tan Man have Bench play left and Beatty at first, Polanco DH. Tan Man, I couldn't agree more. I've long said I think Beatty should be playing a corner infield position. Polanco, yes, while I'm sure he could swing first base as a former middle infielder, Beatty is a corner infielder by trade, grew up obviously playing third base, has done it the entire time throughout the minor leagues and here in the big leagues. Tall, pretty good with the glove. I would like Beatty at first base and have Polanco DH, and maybe that is a change that we see. Maybe even before opening day, we'll see how Polanco fares during training camp or spring training and throughout the Grapefruit League season and how that all goes. No doubt about it. All right, let me share my screen here with you guys. Catch up on everything. So first and foremost, the Robert trade. I already touched on it, so we won't go too deeply into it anymore. But again, this is the Mets essentially saying we are willing to give this guy $22 million and hope that he bounces back into form, that he bounces back into that 2023 version that was contending for the American League MVP. The last 2 years have been really, really bad for Luis Robert Jr. There's no doubt about it. Taking a look at his numbers here, he was 26 years old in 2024, hit .224 and had an on-base percentage of .278, 14 homers during that season. Only played in 100 games, and that has been the other issue for Luis Robert Jr. is staying healthy, being able to stay on the field, and obviously has also had an impact on his final numbers, but finished with a 657 OPS. This past year, played 10 more games. Both seasons ended up being worth a 1.4 wins above replacement, but I mean, the slash line's almost identical, 223 average, so he dropped a point from the year before. 297 OBP, bumped it up about 20 points, but it's under 300 over the last 2 years. And the OPS right next to each other, 657 in 2024, 661 in 2025. So here are Luis Robert's numbers over the past 2 years in 210 games, accumulating a 2.8 wins above replacement, hit 14 home runs in each season, but overall a 223 average, a 288 on base percentage, just a 372 slugging percentage, and a 660 OPS. If you care about OPS plus, 85, meaning 15% below league average. So look, when I woke up to this trade, I'm not going to say I jumped out of bed and was skipping around and happy and thrilled. Okay. Like, I like the idea of Luis Robert Jr. I like the idea of the risk of, hey, here's Luis Angel Acuna, a guy that maybe was going to help contribute to this team in some small ways, but really you're not paying a whole lot. And we'll simply give Robert Jr. a $20 million risk, or take a $20 million risk on him bouncing back into form. So while I think that's possible, there's definitely some volatility in Luis Robert's profile. But on the positive side of that profile, now I'm going to back up here to 2023 when he was 25 years old, coming off of being one of the top prospects in all of baseball. Luis Robert had an unbelievable season, finishing 12th in MVP voting after swatting 38 home runs, driving in 80 RBIs. The on-base percentage, still an issue for him, 315 that year, but a much healthier batting average at 264, an OPS of 857, an OPS plus of 130. So it's in there. And again, this isn't some guy that just came up and had a fluke, really good season. This is a guy that was among, if not the best top prospects in all of Major League Baseball. So because the Mets didn't have to give up that much, in my estimation, when you're talking about Luis Angel Acuna, and I've already forgotten the prospect's name, the pitcher that wasn't even in their top 30 in the Mets system, I'm okay with this kind of risk. But I'm not ready to throw a parade down the canyons of heroes for the Mets World Series in 2026. Quite yet. Not quite yet. Because again, there is a lot of volatility in Robert. And if he does turn into that 25 to 30 home run bat again, or maybe even more like he did in 2023, continues to play the excellent defense in center field, the Mets lineup is in all likelihood going to be among one of the top 5 in baseball, as long as they are also getting the production that they're expecting to get from the rest of the guys 1 through 9. But that is a big if. So again, cautiously optimistic about this trade for Luis Robert Jr., if you ask me. Let's go to the chat really quick. Who else do we got here? Oscar Adamus, thinking Austin Hayes unless may be in play if they don't want to rush bench. Yeah, exactly like I said. Austin Hayes is one of those guys, like as a, Tyrone Taylor's already kind of your 4th outfielder, but I guess Austin Hayes becomes your 4th outfielder where you don't have to rush Carson Bench. There's probably going to be an injury somewhere along the way, and maybe that's the opening in the door for Carson Bench to debut, and the Mets don't have to feel like they're necessarily rushing him, their top prospect. So I'm with you there on Austin Hayes. Ralph Centrone, if Christian Scott is our near future plans, is Christian Scott in our near future plans? Sorry. Yeah, I don't know that he necessarily breaks camp in the Mets rotation. I don't really know what his rehab situation is coming off Tommy John surgery and missing all of last year. I don't know if it benefits him to maybe pitch in relief a little bit and try to get ramped back up to a full starting pitcher's workload. But I said it on these streams before. I think that Christian Scott is probably the first of Brandon Sproat or Jonah Tong to get the call to the big leagues for a spot start. And it's a little malicious in my reasoning, but I think they probably have the least amount of hope for Christian Scott coming off Tommy John surgery. And in my opinion, probably being the lesser of any of those prospects from their time in the Mets farm system. So I think it would kind of be like, I don't want to say a sacrificial lamb kind of thing, but they don't want to mess with Brandon Sproat and Jonah Tong if they are still in this system. They're not going to simply bring one of those guys up for a spot start unless they are going to remain in the rotation in the big leagues. So I think Christian Scott's probably the first of the young guys that gets the call to the Mets if they do require a random start because of an injury or a doubleheader, some type of situation like that. Let's see. Paulo Cumia Bellinger would have been nice. Yes, 100%. And I said it even after they traded for Robert Jr. I still wanted the Mets to be in on Bellinger. I thought he brought a lot to this lineup. I thought he would have brought a lot of defensive versatility, even with Robert holding down center. Could have put Bellinger in left for the majority of the year. Could have still played him at first base, depending on how things worked out with Jorge Polanco. He would have had opportunities to DH as well. And again, then you don't have to rush Carson Bench on this opening day roster. So it would have been nice to get Cody Bellinger without a doubt, even after trading for Luis Robert Jr. Oscar Adama says, hopefully we get a Vaughn-like bounce back, change of scenery, boom from Robert. Yeah, that would be nice. They definitely are hoping that he's looking to put up or able to put up numbers closer to this 2023 season than what they have seen out of Robert out in Chicago over the past 2 years. And I can have a little bit of sympathy for going and playing for a team like the White Sox. I mean, we all played Little League, right? But even in high school, you play for a team that maybe is, just not all there, right? Not a very good team. And it definitely kills a lot of people's motivation. So I can understand that. How much? I'm not so sure, but definitely am cautiously optimistic. I think this could be a nice low risk, high reward deal. But I'm going to have to see it from Robert Jr. before I'm ready to just anoint the Mets the winners of this trade and, ready to be one of the top lineups in all of baseball. We got to see it from this guy first. James McCorn, we need another lefty bat. I'm all in on the Robert trade, though, especially what we got for him. High upside. Definitely like him as a change of atmosphere type of player and still only 28. Yeah, he is still young, and I do like the idea that he has a club option for next year as well. Mets would have to pay him $20 million. If the Mets want to buy that out, it's $2 million. So essentially, Luis Robert costs you $22 million this year, plus Luis Angel Acuna. I am more than okay with that. And all you really need to do to kind of check how other fans are feeling about the Mets is to go look at Philly fans on Twitter, because they are ripping their hair out between the Mets stealing Bo Bichette, introducing him today at Citi Field, and then Philly fans' reaction to what the Mets ended up having to pay for Luis Robert Jr. They are very upset because they were rumored to be in on Robert for a long time. The cost, we were told going back to last year's deadline, was out of this world, sky high. That's why he remained with Chicago. For the Mets to get get him for Luis Angel Acuna, and again, the pitcher from their system who wasn't even in their top 30 prospects, never would have believed that was possible. Never would have believed it would have been that low of a cost. So here is Robert's StatCast from 2025. Look, they're getting an athlete, a specimen. 7 outs above average in the 93rd percentile this past year. Sprint speed, 90th percentile at 29, whatever that actually means. But bat speed is still there, 92nd percentile. Fielding run value at a 7, that's in the 87th percentile. Now you're just hoping that he could get closer to his 2023 form, and this is his StatCast page from 2023. All I got to tell you is that red is really good. There's a lot of red on this page. If he could get even close to replicating this while still being the tremendous fielder that he is, the Mets made a very, very good trade here today to shore up their outfield defense and potentially add an impact bat to their lineup. A guy that also is capable of stealing a lot of bases as well. I go back to this page really quick for you guys. 33 stolen bases this past year. 23 the year before that, 20 in 2023. So a guy that I think is going to add another dynamic to this lineup if he can find his way on base enough, and if he can tap back into that power for sure. Let's see. Who else here? VFVR ain't going to help if dude can't pitch. Yeah, well, pitching is definitely something still hot on Mets fans' minds. They have not done anything to fix the starting rotation, so why don't we jump into that here in just a moment. RM 1042, Luis Robert is a better hitter than Taylor, but those low-risk, high-reward moves almost never pan out, and that's exactly how I woke up feeling this morning. I saw a lot of celebration from Mets fans on social media about landing Robert, and don't get me wrong, I'm not mad about the trade. I think it's almost a no-loss trade, because at the end of the day, you're just giving up money to have Robert on this team and hopefully bounce back. I don't really value Luis Angel Acuna the way that some others may. You really only are giving a financial risk to trading for Luis Robert. So hopefully it pans out. But again, I didn't wake up this morning running, victory laps because they made this trade. We have to see him revert back to his form from 2023 for me to feel really good about this trade. So I hear you, RM. James McCoy, the asking price for the Brewers isn't bad. I don't think either. Sproat and Jet for Peralta. Stearns got to be working that one. That's not far off. We're going to get into that. And that was the rumored trade offer from the Brewers, which the Mets to this point have not been willing to go to. Jet Williams plus Brandon Sproat for 1 year of Freddie Peralta. I think it's posturing by the Mets. I think that they may eventually be willing to do that move, but I think you're going to do everything you can to try to get off of the Jet Williams or off the Brandon Sproat if they really like Jet Williams. And hey, maybe we could give you David Peterson instead so he can kind of replace Freddie Peralta in your big league rotation right now. So I don't think it's a terrible ask by them at all, James. Mike says, I could see Robert doing 235, 22 homers, 70 RBIs with good defense being capable of more. I will sign off on that right now. If you were telling me Luis Robert Jr. is going to hit 22 bombs, driving 70 RBIs, he's only going to hit 225, but he's still going to play tremendous defense in center field, maybe steal 20 to 25 bases, I will sign off on that right now, Mike, 100%. I mean, you look at what the Mets got last year from Tyrone Taylor, from Cedric Mullins, from even some Jeff McNeil, and from Luis Angel Acuna in center field last year, and it was horrific. Just absolutely abysmal, terrible offensive production from those guys, and even to a degree defensive outside of Tyrone Taylor. So if you're telling me 225, 235 average, 22 bombs, 70 RBIs, plus the Gold Glove defense he's shown over the last few years from Luis Robert Jr. this season, I am totally on board with that. Mike mentioned sign Valdez and trade for Peralta. You feel really good about the rotation if that's the case, right? if you were to get Freddie Peralta in a trade, depending on what's going back, and then sign Framber Valdez, you feel really good about this team. You would feel really good about saying this team can compete for the division again. Again, who knows what the Braves are going to be this year. I suspect a bounce back from them coming off a really down 2025. The Phillies are the Phillies. They're basically running it back. They were much better than the Mets at the end. I think they were playing above their heads for the final month of the season, and it all came to a halting stop against the Dodgers in that DS. But I think the Mets have a puncher's chance in the division at that point. So let's see here. Joaquin Rodriguez, thank you for the response. Of course, Joaquin, he says, I would like for the Mets to trade for Freddie Peralta and sign Framber Valdez, and we need another hitter. I do think it's very unlikely they're going to get another bat, guys. I thought maybe there was still a chance to go for Cody Bellinger. That, of course, is now out the window. So I don't know who else would be out there free agent-wise. I'm going to pull that up here in just a second. But let's talk a little bit about this Freddie Peralta idea, because we did see that rumor today that they were looking, or that they had offered the Mets. First, the conversation began where they were asking for Jonah Tong. The Mets quickly shut that down, as they should. There's about one name that's actually realistic to expect in a trade for Jonah Tong, and that would be Tariq Skubal. Obviously, that wouldn't be everything, but Tariq Skubal coming in a package for Jonah Tong plus, yeah, we can have that conversation at least. But for Freddie Peralta for 1 year, no. So the Mets shut that down really quickly. Well, then we ended up hearing that the Brewers had offered something along the lines of Jet Williams and Brandon Sproat for Freddie Peralta. And now we're getting a little bit closer. I've said it here before. Brandon Sproat showed me some poise last season in his handful of major league starts. He came up this time last year, as the Mets' top pitching prospect. That was before Nolan McLean continued his ascent and then had an amazing first 8 MLB starts. Jonah Tong really opened some eyes in his second professional season, building off his first year back in 2024. So Brandon Sproat kind of gets overlooked a little bit, but I still think the best case scenario is that Brandon Sproat is going to turn into a very reliable, steady number 3, something along the lines of what Ranger Suarez is. Very different profiles. I'm not trying to say that they are similar in their pitching ways, but a guy that you could depend to go out there, give you 25 to 30 starts every year, pitch between a 3.50 and a 4 ERA, and for the most part is going to give you quality starts. He's not going to go out and give you 6-7 innings of shutout ball every time, but you're not going to see him blow up and give up 5 runs in 3 innings very often either. You can get something that is so much better than that right now for a team that's looking to win now, that has an embarrassment of riches in their farm system pitching-wise in Freddie Peralta. And so the hope is that Brandon Sproat could one day turn into what Freddie Peralta is right now, or you could just go and trade for Freddie Peralta. Now, what gives me pause is that you also throw in Jet Williams. And I am not even that big or high on Jet Williams. We've talked about it before. He's 5'7". I am not a heightist. I am not a sizist, but it definitely makes you think and wonder a little bit. There's a few examples out there, but for every few example out there, there's about a million more of guys that were undersized and for one reason or another just don't pan out at the highest level of the game. So there's a Jose Altuve out there. For every Jose Altuve, there's a million other guys that were 5'7", 5'8", that just couldn't hit for enough power, didn't have enough pop. Yeah, they could do some other things really nicely, but I still feel like that would be a lot. It's a fair ask, but if I'm the Mets, I'm looking to work off of one of those names. If they want Brandon Sproat, okay, but you can't also have Jet Williams. Okay, you want Jet Williams? All right, well, then we could throw in David Peterson plus another lower level prospect. So you could put Peterson into your rotation immediately and you could still contend for the National League Central this year. Would you prefer Kodai Senga? I really doubt that, especially given that they have money constraints out in Milwaukee, but I'd be looking to get off of one of those names and try to find another way to appease Milwaukee in that proposed deal. Freddie Peralta, look, I've seen a lot of people come out and say he's not a top 15 pitcher. He's not a top 15 pitcher in baseball. That's too much. Truth of the matter is the guy goes out every game, every 5th day. He's going to give you 28 to 30 starts year in and year out. And he's going to pitch to an ERA that's basically in line with the top pitchers in baseball. Since 2022, he has the 22nd best earned run average among starting pitchers. And some people might not think that's great, but everyone wants a quote-unquote ace. Well, there's only 30 teams in the big leagues. He has the 22nd best earned run average over that time. How many teams have more than one ace? And if that's the case, then he would fall in line with that definition of sorts. And here are his 2025 numbers from StatCast. I mean, 84th percentile strikeout to walk ratio at 19.1. Strikeout percentage in the 86th percentile at 28.2. 80th percentile in extension if you care about that kind of stuff. Whiff percentage, 80th percentile. This is a guy that I think can make a really formidable 1-2 punch with Nolan McLean at the top of the Mets rotation. 2025 had a 2.70 earned run average, a 1.08 whip, over 176 two-thirds innings, and 2026 has him projected at 184 innings. The ERA going up significantly at 3.68. That would definitely be disappointing, don't get me wrong, but still that healthy K percentage at 27%, a 3.5 F WAR, just 0.1 lower than what he just put out in a career season here in 2025 with Milwaukee. So I like the idea, Peralta. Again, based on that proposal, Sproat and Jet Williams, I do my best if I'm David Stearns to try to knock one of those names off and find some other way to make Milwaukee happy. What do you guys think about that? I want to hear from you. Let me know. Jimmy Matthews, Valdez, and Peralta would make your favorites in the division. I still have a lot of questions. I mean, this might be Mets fanitis, but after the way 2025 ended with all the different changes to this team, even with Framber Valdez and with Freddie Peralta in this Mets rotation, I still would have to see it before I'm ready to say we're the favorites in the division. Just, again, probably a little bit of Mets fanitis, you know, the scars of my past being a fan of this franchise, but I would need to see it before I'm ready to declaratively say entering 2026 that we're the favorites in the National League East. Again, I'm expecting a bounce back from Atlanta. Philly, still the top dog until proven otherwise, though I do think they take a step back this year. So we shall see. But that is nice to hear from you, Jimmy. He's a Yankees fan, he says, but the Phillies haven't done anything. Mets just have to stay healthy. Fair enough. Fair enough. Yeah, that's kind of been the thing about the Mets my entire life, though, is if you stay healthy, if this happens, if that happens, if that doesn't happen. And usually those things don't break the right way for this franchise, based on my experience at least. New York, I don't know how to say it, man. New York and Flavor Mets ain't going anywhere next season after losing Diaz and signing Devin Williams. That is one of the biggest points that I think a lot of people have glossed over. Not everybody, but it is so crucial that Devin Williams gets off to a good start with the Mets next year as their closer. He is coming in with arguably the most pressure, I think, of any player in baseball joining a new team. To assume the role of closer from a guy that was here for 7 seasons and was beloved by the end of his tenure, that was basically the top closer in all of baseball at this point in Edwin Diaz. There is no one that I think has to get off to a better, faster start than Devin Williams as the Mets closer next year, because you know, if he is blowing a save in April, I don't care if it's a cold night with only 20,000 in attendance at Citi Field, those boos are going to rain down on him. So I think it is very important that Devin Williams gets off to a good start with his new team, without a doubt about it, especially with some of the struggles that he experienced in his lone season with the Yankees last year. It is crucial that he does start fast out of the gate for this team and inspires belief in him as the back end guy for this bullpen. Let's see, who else do we got here? My guys, Mets. Stearns currently gets a B+ for this offseason. I'll give him a B right now. I'm not ready to say plus. I'll give him a B. And it's not because of the sentimentality I have towards some of the guys that are gone. I think getting rid of Nimmo is a fine deal when you look at it in a vacuum. Getting back Marcus Semien for 3 years, is, I don't love it, but okay, we'll see. Losing Pete stinks, but have we replaced his production at this point? I think we've gotten there now. I think we're close to that. But still, losing Edwin Diaz was unacceptable. The way that those negotiations went in for him to go and strengthen the Dodgers, it's hard for me to give him a B plus yet. I need to get a little bit more. I need to get that Framber Valdez. I need to get that Freddie Peralta, or maybe some other big name pitcher that we're not thinking about, for me to put him over the top to B plus, or dare I even say an A grade for this offseason. No Eureka flavor. This is a throwaway season until pitchers are in free agency. Well, we shall see. They might just surprise you, no Eureka flavor. The Mets would need at least Peralta, Valdez, and another bat, says Mike. Yeah, that's a big wish list. I think they're only getting one big name starting pitcher, whether it's a guy like Valdez through free agency or if it is a trade for a guy like Peralta, I don't know. But I think after that, they are going to heavily rely upon big steps forward from the young guys, whoever still remains from a potential trade, and bounce backs in the form of Kodai Senga, Sean Manaea, David Peterson. I think that is how they're going to navigate this. I don't expect there to be two new starting pitchers added to this rotation. That would really surprise me. Let's see. Mark Rapp. Some reason my gut tells me Devin is going to have a dominant season and Diaz will flop in LA. Not going to lie, Mark, kind of share that same feeling as you. Diaz has obviously been, was way better last year. I think is still considered one of the top closers in the game. And he's going to a new place, and we'll see how it works. And, he probably won't have to work too often because their offense is going to be putting up 8, 9, 10 runs a game, and their starting rotation is filthy. They probably win a lot of games 7-1 anyway. He probably won't even need to be used all that often, but I could see that happening. Going to a new spot like that out in LA, it's almost like a Juju thing, right? Like he said he wanted to go to a place to win. Could you imagine if he goes there and then he's a big reason they're not winning games? Meanwhile, Devin Williams gets overlooked because of some bad, rough appearances with the Yankees, his first time in a new city, new team. I could see him bouncing back. Absolutely. I'm with you there, man. Ralph Centron says, put on your GM hat. I would love to hear your thoughts on what you would do free agents or trades before the season starts. All right. Here's my GM hat going on. And I'm going to preface it by saying that I am going to try to work within the realistic parameters of what I think is possible at this point, based on what we have heard from the Mets front office, based on what we have kind of got an idea from the reporters that cover the team. I still think they need to add another bat. I would not be against trying to add a legitimate full-time designated hitter. That pushes Mark Vientos out of this equation, so maybe he gets dealt. But I would love the idea of trying to trade for Yandy Diaz, as someone mentioned in here before. I don't know where Tampa Bay stands with him. We do know they are always trying to cut costs. He is the most expensive player on their roster right now, due $12 million. Yes, he's 34 years old. Yes, he has only got 1 year left of team control. I would love to find a way to get Yandy Diaz on this team. If that means sending Mark Vientos in that package, I'm willing to take 1 year of Yandy Diaz, see what the rest of this prospect group has developed after another year, and if that role can be filled after Diaz as a free agent next year, or simply go out and find another veteran DH bat to replace Diaz with if it doesn't work out here with the Mets. So that would be one move that I would feel great about. 300 hitter, 25 home run bat, over 800 OPS. Now you have one less question mark about, hey, is Mark Vientos the 2024 version of himself, or is he the one that we saw last year in 2025? Starting pitcher wise, absolutely have to land one of these three names: Framber Valdez, Freddie Peralta, or Joe Ryan. So I am calling both the Twins and Milwaukee. I'm finding out what it's going to cost to get one of those guys. Joe Ryan has 2 years of control left. Freddie Peralta has 1 year of control left. I am a far bigger fan of Freddie Peralta. He is the guy that I would put the most impetus on trying to acquire and put at the top of this rotation with Nolan McLean. It's got to be about what it's going to cost in terms of prospects and players going back to those respective teams in Minnesota and Milwaukee. And if those don't work out, you may just have to bite the bullet, sign Framber Valdez, even though he has the qualifying offer attached to him, and put him atop your rotation with Nolan McLean. After that, I think you're pretty much set. It'd be nice to get another relief arm. We got Luis Garcia today, as we know. I don't think he's going to make the entire season through this year in the Mets bullpen. I think there's some young arms that they have coming up through the system that they are feeling really excited about, that are going to get opportunities to pitch in relief this year. But I wouldn't be against getting someone that's got veteran experience like Garcia, but maybe a little bit better if that's possible. Not a lot of names like that still remaining out here, but that's probably how I'd go for this. Let's see. Mark Rapp says, Devin had a rough first season in New York and wants to stay in New York. To me, it shows he has balls. We love balls, right? I heard a story about Devin Williams after one of the first games of the Yankees season last year. He didn't even know how to get back to his apartment. I mean, you think about it, and it's like you get traded or signed to a team. When you get signed, it's a little different because you were talking with that team with your agents. When you get traded, it could come out of nowhere. I don't recall exactly when the Yankees traded for him last offseason, but then you go to spring training down in Florida or Arizona. So you're not in the same city or state as where your team plays their home games. He didn't even know how to get back home to his apartment from the Bronx last year and had to call somebody and ask how to do that. So anyway, the whole point of this is I think it was a big learning curve for him. It was his first time playing in the big leagues in a different city. And I think him even just recognizing that and realizing, hey, I could do it here. It wasn't the best fit at the beginning here, and I needed more time to adjust. I think that is definitely encouraging on Devin Williams. Darren Rivera, I think the Mets would be better against lefties, but the defense with Bichette and Polanco concerns me as well as Devin Williams and how he fares as the closer. Defense is definitely something that is a little concerning. Again, we thought it was all going to be about run prevention. We thought that the Mets were going to, go get Gold Glovers all over and whatnot. But obviously, that does not seem to be the case with two different guys playing out of position. Polanco at first, Bo Bichette at third base, who already had his struggles at shortstop. So I'm with you there. It felt like last year, every single time the Mets were, a ball was put in play against the Mets, I was holding my breath. And so again, just like the Luis Robert trade, I'm not ready to sit here today and start running victory laps and say that all of the Mets ills from 2025 are cured and this is definitively a better team than last year, because there are still some big questions. I got to see it before I'm ready to just simply say that. So I completely understand where you're coming from, Darren. And to a lesser degree on Devin Williams, though, I am much higher on his signing than I think a lot of teams are, despite how irritating it was that Edwin Diaz did leave to go to the Dodgers. Danny Dom, we need one more bat. What do you think about Eugenio Suarez or Yandy Diaz? All right, so I just got finished saying that I would love to get Yandy Diaz. Don't know what the Rays situation is, if they are willing to deal him. Again, most expensive player on their payroll right now. 1 year of control on a 34-year-old. Seems like the kind of trade that the Rays would make, right? Don't know what they would ask for in that case. So I think that's probably not super likely at this point in the offseason. As far as Eugenio Suarez, I do like the bat, but we just talked about the defensive struggles of this team. Look, if he's going to be the DH, okay, but what happens if Jorge Polanco doesn't work out at first and you need to move Brett Beatty to first base, but you want to keep Polanco's bat in the lineup? What happens if Bo Bichette is struggling mightily at third base? I think they're going to give him all the time in the world to figure it out over there before pushing him to designated hitter, but they haven't exactly given themselves a luxury or a lot of wiggle room as far as some of these players playing out of position not panning out. That is definitely a concern of mine. So as much as I like the bat that Eugenio Suarez brings, I just don't know if the Mets have room for another guy that doesn't exactly thrill you with his glove, even if he is slated to be the designated hitter more often than not. Joaquin Rodriguez, Suarez strikes out too much, will kill you rallies. Yeah, he does strike out a lot as well. He is a 3 true outcome kind of guy for sure, no doubt about it. Big strikeout numbers for Eugenio Suarez. But let's see who else we got here. I think I wanted to talk about something else, but we may have covered it. Luis Garcia, just real quick before we end the stream here. Appreciate you guys tuning in. Guys, go ahead, leave this video a like. Go ahead and do that right now. I really appreciate it. Big time help with the channel, and subscribe if you're not already. Daily Mets content, all coverage of Major League Baseball here on the channel. Be sure to hit that sub button. Go ahead and do that now. We got a fun interview coming out tomorrow with a WFAN personality, so looking forward to having that one up for you guys tomorrow evening. And otherwise, yeah, this is your place for all things Mets and Major League Baseball. So really appreciate you guys. Luis Garcia, Let's take a look at his numbers. He signs a deal with the Mets, very heavily incentive-laden deal. Last season, 3.42 earned run average in 58 games. He was with the Dodgers, Nationals, and the Angels. Has a career 4.07 ERA in 603 appearances. I think he still can throw really hard, if I'm not mistaken, that he still can light a radar gun up. So that's not a bad thing to have, obviously. StatCast real quick. Let's go here. The GOAT Joey says, do you think Freddie will go to the Mets? I do. If he's getting traded, I do think it goes to the Mets. I think if he gets traded, that the Mets will get him. For what? I don't know. Also, I'm conditioned at this point, like one of our viewers commented earlier, that every time the Mets are linked to somebody this offseason, they don't end up getting them. And it's someone completely out of the blue. So in that regard, I'm thinking maybe not. Maybe the Mets won't actually get him since that report just came out here today. But could be wrong. 96.9 mile per hour sinker and 96.8 mile per hour four-seamer for Luis Garcia. You know what? Again, this is just one of those guys like that. You know, it's like your Ryan Stanek for this year. Veteran that's been there, done it for a long time. Hope he's got a little bit something left in the tank. But at the end of the day, it's like a $1.5 million deal for Garcia. You wipe your hands clean and DFA him if things don't pan out with him. So, again, not another move that's going to get me crazy and super hyped or anything, but probably a good depth move for the Mets to add Luis Garcia to their bullpen, at least for the time being. All right, these last two right here. Chrono Sinks, what do you think the Mets will give up for Peralta? I think Sproat's going to have to be a part of it. So I think Brandon Sproat for sure. And then after that, again, if it started with Jet Williams and the Mets were hesitant to do that, then I think they try to back the Brewers off of Jet Williams and find another way to please the Brewers. I think you could live with giving up Brandon Sproat. You get in the more sure thing in a reliable number 2 in Freddie Peralta for your rotation this year. And then from there, you try to back off Jet Williams and see if maybe a Peterson or even somehow a Kodai Senga, somebody from this rotation right now, the veterans, can appease them. And if not, then maybe you're throwing in a lower level prospect, someone in the top 10 to 15 area, not Jet Williams, who currently ranks as the second overall prospect. So I think it's going to cost something like that, but I do believe it begins with Sprout. No Eureka flavor. Mets have Nolan McLean. Yes. Liz, supposedly Sprout and Jet for Peralta is what I heard. Hold on a sec. Mookie, come on. You guys know my German Shepherd, Mookie. Yeah, he's a loud boy. James McCorn, Sproat and Reimer, man, chalk it up. I said that same thing as far as Reimer. I'd be more comfortable giving up him, who I think doesn't really have a position at this point. 18 errors in like 84 games at third base this past season. I feel like he's going to be a Mark Vientos 2.0 in the future. Look, the bat is really impressed. But if you don't have a position, you really need to be a 35 to 40 home run bat to be a big league designated hitter coming up as a 25 or 26-year-old. So I'd be more comfortable giving up Jacob Reimer, I think, than Jet Williams. James McCorn, as long as the Mets keep Weniger, Santucci, and Thornton, they are the next wave. Yeah, a couple of really impressive arms from the Mets system that you just listed there. And look, that's the luxury of having one of the top farms in baseball. This has been not something that happened overnight. The Mets have been drafting and developing really well over the last several years. And hopefully we're going to, number one, get to see these guys start contributing to the Mets themselves here very soon. But number two, we'll get the chance to potentially put some of these guys in deals and get them to help complete trade packages and bring in talent from other teams around the league. So exciting times, guys. Big moves for the Mets. Luis Robert Jr. is a Met. Bo Bichette is a Met. And it doesn't sound like they're done yet. Maybe a starting pitcher here coming soon as well. So, guys, we're going to wrap it up here, but wanted to check in with you again. Big video coming out tomorrow with a WFAN personality that I'm sure you're all very familiar with. So, look forward to that. Turn channel notifications on. Hit that sub button if you're not already subscribed. Trying to get to that goal of 6K by opening day. We got 65 days to do it. And go ahead and share this with a Mets and baseball fan in your life. On Facebook, through a text, however you communicate with your loved ones. This is their place for all things Mets and Major League Baseball. Appreciate you guys tuning in, though. Till next time, I'm Tony Metro. Stay true to the orange and blue.